My first week was very unique, probably one that wouldn't happen to any other missionary. I arrived in my area, got matched up with my trainer, and when we got to our house, I pulled my luggage inside of our apartment, and my trainer informed me that we had been evicted from our apartment. And so we had to pack everything up that night because the next day we had to be out of our apartment. So the way this is how Brazil is a little bit different than Utah is the way they move from house to house is with these basically those Volkswagen vans, and they chop the back off and they put a flatbed on there. So those really old Volkswagen vans, flatbed on the back, and you throw all of your stuff on top of there, and then they throw some ropes around it, and that's how you move your stuff from point A to point B. So we rented one of those, and we loaded all of our stuff up on there, which included couches, beds, kitchen tables. I mean, anything that was in the apartment on top of there. And then we were driving over to another missionary's house where we were going to stay until we could find another apartment. In Brazil, you normally, if you're on the apartment hunt, it's done by the missionaries and not by the office or anything else like that. So we loaded everything up, and I rode on the back, inside of a couch, on the back of the truck, as we drove over to the other place. And my companion was inside with the driver. There wasn't room for me inside. We get there, we unloaded, and we were in a very small room with 4 missionaries. So we were sleeping on the floor on our mattresses. Inside this first week, just some unique experiences that I had. There was a huge rainstorm that came in and flooded the entire apartment. So I woke up in the middle or in the morning, and all my clothes were wet. Mattress was completely soaking, and then also in that same time we had rats in the house and different types of cockroaches that were crawling on us as we were trying to sleep, just because we were sleeping on the ground and the apartment wasn't very clean or anything like that. But that lasted for 7 weeks, sleeping in those conditions and living in those conditions while trying to learn the language, while trying to take a bus 45 minutes over to our area where we lived or where we worked to find a house to live in, as well as teach the investigators that we have or had. Some of the unique situations in that first week are you really don't speak the language. You are taught in the MTC to have almost like a memorized script of what you can say about each lesson. And so during that time, as we were teaching, I would say what I could, and then I would try as hard as I could to respond or to understand what the people we were teaching would say. One unique thing that I would do, and really benefited me as far as learning the language goes, in that first week is I got a suggestion to take a little small notebook, and anytime I heard a word that I didn't recognize, to write it in that notebook. And that notebook filled up in that first week, 2 weeks, as I was hearing so many words that I didn't recognize. And every night when I got home, you had about 20 minutes after planning before you went to bed, and I would just go through the dictionary, write stuff down, ask my companion what those words meant, that type of thing. And in doing so, I became extremely proficient in the language quickly, because I was actively trying to learn the language, because I wanted to be more of a contributor in lessons and that type of a thing. So yeah, that's kind of the first week for me. Just jumped in with running and trying to figure everything out. As far as missionary work goes, I know that when I was down there, they reached the milestone of over 1 million members in Brazil, which is a really cool milestone. And it really is. It's a place where the church is just so ready to grow. The people are humble. They're already faithful people. Most of them have been Catholics their whole life, as the German influence brought Catholicism and that type of thing. And so everybody really has a strong testimony or a strong belief in Jesus Christ. Even to the point of truck drivers will put signs that say, God is faithful, or I believe in God, and stuff like that on there. I mean, they may be a tough customer or a tough-looking person, but they have this faith in God that's just kind of built into them. And so it really makes for missionary work that is unlike any other place, I think, in the world. They're ready to receive it, and they have this desire to learn the truth. That's what my experiences was, as we taught people, as we help them understand about a true and everlasting, true and everlasting gospel, that they were excited about that. They had believed in this church that came from Europe that they didn't really know a lot about, or their parents had believed in it, and they were ready to accept something that was living, that was receiving modern revelation, that type of thing. And as far as that goes, the growth rates were incredible. I mean, as we saw in our mission, my mission went from about, I think, around 45 baptisms a month, which is very low for Brazil, up to 150 baptisms a month, which is a substantial growth, just because the people were ready to receive it. The missionaries were teaching lessons by the Spirit, and it grew a lot. I know there are lots of parts of Brazil that grow a lot faster and have a lot more baptisms, and they're the areas that usually aren't as strong Catholic. We had a lot of strong Catholic people in Minas Gerais that were really set in their ways of Catholicism because of tradition and not necessarily because of belief. And so it was hard to pull them away out of that tradition and demonstrate that there was a true church. So yeah. I served in a tourist town called São Lourenço in the south of my mission, and this is kind of where I had my first taste of the Brazilian culture with holidays, with respect to holidays. They had a lot of Catholic holidays that they celebrate. One was very cool in this tourist town. They took painted chalk and they spread it up and down the streets in like the most beautiful designs. So they would use it's got to be a ton of chalk, but they would do these pictures of Christ out of this colored chalk on the roads, and we're talking it was 20 feet wide, and they would run the length of a whole road, and they would be these scenes of maybe Christ's life, or because they were Catholic holidays, a lot of crosses and things like that. But that was one of the coolest experience I've had with their culture, with regards to holidays. Now, as far as their culture goes, outside of that, it's very focused on soccer, right? I'm sure everybody's heard that. It's focused on soccer, and it was a big deal to them. Sundays is when they played soccer games the most. So usually between 2:00 in the afternoon and 6 to 8 o'clock at night on Sundays, couldn't find a soul on the streets, because they were all inside watching soccer. And that really is their passion. As you're walking down the streets, you'll see kids playing soccer. We often played with them and then invited their parents to come out, and we teach them a lesson or invite their parents to come to church with us. Soccer was a way that really, it's huge down there. They eat, sleep, and breathe it. One experience that we had was teaching some youth that loved soccer, and every P day we get a chance to go play with them, play soccer, and you could just tell that. It was just so they were so passionate about it. They all had their soccer uniforms from their teams. They all had their team that they cheered for, and it wasn't just them. It was really everybody down there. It was a huge part of their culture. Other parts of their culture or traditions that I saw was some of how the people interact. They're very friendly. By nature, they're very kind. Anybody will have a conversation with you just about any time of the day. You can be walking down the street and you can ask somebody, what they believe or something like that, and they'll have an honest conversation with you. And that really is probably another reason that contributes to the incredible missionary work down there. Is they're open-hearted. They're willing to serve. They're willing to talk. Most people will talk to you, and when I first got down there, this was a shock for me. Is they're close talkers. They'll be a couple inches from your face, and they'll be in a very intense conversation with you. And if you're not expecting it, you're kind of like, "Whoa, you're in my face!" Like, they're very close. But that's just part of how they are. They're just passionate about what they believe, what they know, and that was one of the things that I noticed when I first got down there, especially. Part of etiquette goes. As far as etiquette goes, that people they want you to love their food because they sacrifice a lot for it. A lot of the people down there come from a very difficult financial situation. There's not a whole lot of job opportunities down there that pay very well, especially if you don't have secondary education. And so a lot of them just graduate high school and then they try to find a job, and so they really sacrifice a lot to prepare meals for the missionaries. So they would love it when we would rave about their food, and we would, because it was always very delicious. And so one thing that we noticed is complimenting them throughout the meal. telling them that you love their food, that this is so good, that you're grateful for it, that you probably couldn't do what we're going to do today without this sister preparing you a meal. And that was very, very, very good. I mean, it was just a really cool experience to be able to thank them for it, and they appreciated it. Other than that, they're very laid back. There's not a whole lot of etiquette that's required beyond the normal etiquette that you should normally use. I don't know a lot about the actual history itself. I know in recent history they had some problems with inflation, which was interesting. They were using a monetary unit called the cruzeiro, and inflation was going really crazy because there was some corruption in the government and that type of a thing. And so they tried to get a handle on that, and they switched to the real, or the real is how we would say it. And when they switched to monetary units, it really controlled inflation, and now you really don't see as much inflation. That's really the only thing I know about the history side of things. It was some of the southern parts of Brazil were founded by Germans. There was a lot of slave trade going on in the northeast part of Brazil, near the Bahia. So it's actually a really unique mission. It's a very tall mission, and so you can actually get into, I think it's between the top of the mission and the bottom of the mission, it's about a 20-hour bus ride if you were going to go top to bottom. From the mission home, it's about 8 to the south part of the mission, and then about 12 to the very north part. So as you went north in my mission, it got really hot. Just dry everywhere, dirt roads, days that were over 100 degrees almost every day. And then if you went to the south of my mission, that 8-hour bus ride from the mission home, you got into where it was really green. It was cold. I saw snow on a mountaintop, really foggy, that type of a thing. So you really got a full range of weather depending on where you were at. And kind of in the middle, it was just, it was hot during the summers. It was cool during the winters, but not cold like as if you were in the south of my mission. Personally, I was in the south part of my mission during both winters, and it was very cold. And I didn't take a sweatshirt or sweaters or anything like that. So I bought some hand knitted ones from some street vendors, and I would wear those over my white shirts, my long sleeve white shirts, and that's how we tried to stay warm. I had 4 blankets on my bed at night because there's no heaters or air conditionings usually in the houses there. That you just have a fan that you can use if it gets too warm. But down in the south, it was cold. It was real cold. And then I did serve up north as well, and up there it was really warm. Probably, you're sleeping at night and it's probably 93 degrees in your house, and you have a fan going at the bottom of your bed to try to cool you down, but you get used to sleeping in the heat and get used to walking around in it every day as well. So as far as the climate goes, it's the full gamut right there. You got everything in there. So this is like one of my favorite parts of Brazil was the food. It was so good down there. The staple was rice and beans. So every member eats a big meal for lunch. Lunch is the primary meal down there. And so we would eat with members, and the staple that they always had was rice and beans and then some sort of meat. Usually a whole chicken or something like that. Chicken was usually the cheapest, and then if it was a member who maybe wanted to do something really special for the elders, they would buy some sort of steak or something like that and fry it up. The rice and beans was interesting. So it was they were whole beans, but they were in sort of like a sauce, almost like a boiled down sauce. And then you would put what's called farofa, which is flour, but not the type of flour that we use here, like the white baking flour. It's more of a gritty, more coarse type of flour that usually has some sort of seasoning in it. And you'd put that on top. And then they always had vegetables. They always had lettuce and tomatoes on every meal. So you could either put lettuce and tomatoes on top of your rice and beans or on the side and kind of eat it as a compliment. And then you'd have your meat as well. And then the traditional dessert that I always have down there was called pudim. And basically it was almost like a jello, more like a flan that had kind of a strong taste, but it was like that, like I'd say like jello, but it was made with sweetened condensed milk and that type of thing, and it was really good. I really liked it. Another interesting thing that we don't really eat a lot here that they had down there was this. I can't remember what the fruit is in English, but it's called goiabada. is the fruit down there, and they make a paste with it, and then you put it on cheese. So it's almost like a jelly, a really thick jelly that you put on cheese, and then you eat that, just the cheese and the jelly, which is really good. That's one of my favorites too, that I had never even thought of having before. So one time, an interesting story about a food we had. It was during General Conference. There was a member in between the sessions that was feeding us, and they decided to have goat stomach, which I'd never had before, and thought, why not? Let's try it. So got my rice and beans, and then they prepared this special goat stomach that they were really looking forward to. And I took a small piece just to start, and I put it in my mouth, and it was like chewing on a rubber band. I couldn't get through it. So I'm chewing as hard as I can, and my mouth is just bouncing up and down off of the goat stomach, and it almost had the texture of like your tongue. So it's kind of like I don't know, like a porous-y texture, but also rubbery, and it was pretty rough. I couldn't get it down. I mean, I ended up swallowing the piece whole because I couldn't get through it. I was chewing as hard as I could, and I couldn't get through the goat stomach. So that was a really interesting experience, and all the Brazilians loved it. They thought it was a treat. But I really only had that once. And occasionally we had members, I don't know if you've ever heard of the restaurants like Rodigios or those types of restaurants where they bring meat around. Also Tucanos is another one where they bring meat around. We had a member that did a barbecue like that for us one time, where we had chicken hearts with lime, which was really good. We had all sorts of types of different meats that they would skewer and then barbecue, and you just slice off these different pieces. So I think that was a treat, of course, for us. We loved to have all that meat, which is tasty. There's no missions in Brazil where you have a bike or a car or anything like that. So anywhere you go is usually on foot. So I found personally that we didn't buy a lot of groceries because the grocery store was usually a mile, 2 miles away, and any groceries that you bought you had to walk home with. So what we would do is they have bread stores about on every corner. So we would, and also these places called lanchonete, which is it's basically just a hamburger stand on almost every corner too. So what we would do is we'd wake up in the morning, and as part of our exercise, we would walk to a bread store or jog to a bread store and buy some bread in the morning, bring it back and eat it for our breakfast, because it was just easier to transport that way. We'd have lunch with a member, and then at night, as we were walking home, we would just stop really quick and order a hamburger that they usually make, and they'd put an egg on the hamburger for you or something like that. That was really good. And then we would just walk home with our hamburgers and then eat them after we had done our planning and everything like that as we were getting ready for bed. So that's kind of how we did it with meals. Not a whole lot of preparation of meals inside our apartment, but mostly just bread in the morning, hamburger at night, and whatever we got from the members during the day. And that worked out great. We made some great friends. We had some great contacts with the people that we consistently saw at those bread stores. And I think everybody that we purchased bread or hamburgers from came to church with us at least once, if not more times, or were eventually converted or something like that. So it served as a great missionary opportunity as well to be able to make these friends, these acquaintances, and then they obviously wondered what we were doing, and so we would be able to teach them too. So those kind of how we used those opportunities to do missionary work, which is cool. So these are some common words you'll use every day in lessons, and there's some good vocabulary to start learning. The first word is Mormon, which is used in the Book of Mormon as well as the prophet, and it's almost the same in Portuguese, and it's Mormon, or Mormon, Mormon. And then faith is fé, fé. Pretty simple. Repentance, this one was a little bit more difficult. This one is arrependimento. 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 And then this one you'll use all the time when you're inviting people to be baptized, and it's baptism. And you say it baptismo. Baptismo. After the baptism, you will use this one a lot as well with Holy Ghost, and it's Espírito Santo. Espírito Santo, which is ironically the name of a state in Brazil. Yep. This one you'll invite members to come to church. Church is igreja. Igreja. It's part of the name as well of the church. A Igreja de Jesus Cristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Scriptures, your escrituras. Revelation, revelação. And then Book of Mormon is O Livro de Mormon. O Livro is book, the book. Mormon is the Book of Mormon. This one you'll use a lot as well. It's the Bible, and it's a Biblia. A Biblia. And then prophet, o profeta. O profeta. The apostles, os apóstolos. Os apóstolos. Sacrament is sacramento. This was one that threw me for a loop at first, and it was priesthood. And I thought it was going to be something easy like priesthood, but it is sacerdocio. Sacerdocio. Use that one a lot as well. Prayer is oração. Oração. Obedience. Obediencia. Obediencia. Commandments. Os mandamentos. Mandamentos. Relief Society, a Sociedade de Socorro. That's how you say Relief Society. Is a sociedade is a society. De socorro is of relief. Temple is templo. Let's see here. Missionary is missionario. Missionario. Sister is irmã, but you just pronounce it sister. You call the sister sister or irmã. Elders, eldari. Eldari. Preach my gospel is pregar. Meu evangelho. Pregar means to preach. Meu is my, and evangelho is gospel. And I think that's all of them. So I was with a companion. His name's Elder Feinauer. He was an American, and he was one of the few American companions that I did have. I had mostly Brazilian companions. He was a very good missionary. We were both zone leaders serving in an area that was known for being kind of a tough area. One day we were coming home. We had just taught a lesson, and it was around 9:10 at night. And we were walking down the street, and we were speaking in English. And we noticed that there was a girl in front of us, maybe in her late 20s, walking down the street as well. And we were walking very quickly, trying to get home before 9:30, and I kept getting the impression that I needed to talk to this girl. She kind of crossed the other side of the street because she thought that these two Americans walking down the street was sort of weird, maybe at 9 o'clock at night, and she maybe was a little apprehensive of us, maybe, and I just, it kept coming to me more than once that I needed to talk to her. So I finally told my companion that we need to go talk to her. So we crossed the street, and I approached her, and I got her name, and I said, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ, and we'd love to stop by your house and leave a message with you and your family about the gospel of Jesus Christ and how it can change your life and how it's been restored. And nothing really came of it. She said, sure, you can stop by. I'm really only home at this time of night, and you probably won't catch most of my family ever anyways. And so he said, okay. So it didn't have a huge impact on me. About a week later, we hadn't had a chance to visit her yet, because of the timing when she was only home at that time of night, and we had multiple other contacts that we were working with, and we kind of had got down at our planning session, and we gone through everybody, and I'm flipping through the different people in my planner, and I said, well, there's Poliana. We could go visit her, I guess. We'd stop by, at 8 o'clock. She said she's not home till 9:30 or around 9:30, so might as well try. So we stopped in around 8 o'clock and knocked on the door, and she happened to be there. She said, it is so crazy that you found me here. This is the one night in this whole month that I'll be here before 9 o'clock. And we said, wow, What a coincidence, right? It wasn't really a coincidence. So we asked if we could come in and talk to her, and we stepped inside and we invited the whole family. And it was her aunt, her brother, and I think another cousin of hers there that first visit. And we taught them about the gospel, and immediately they were filled with kind of an excitement, more excitement about the gospel being restored, as well as they had many questions that they wanted to ask us. So we taught them, invited them to come to church that Sunday, and marked baptismal dates with every single one of them on that first visit. And then we marked the time to come back, and Poliana said that she would work with her work and see if she'd be able to get off a couple minutes early so that she could be home by around 8:45, so then we could then teach her a lesson and be home by our 9:30 time. So she did that, and that was kind of a first step of faith for her. Is she worked her schedule out so that we could teach her. So we started meeting with her on a daily basis, and every time we got there, there was usually a couple family members, her brother and then the aunt. And every single time we would teach them a commandment or something like that, and they would have a list of maybe 10 questions about it. Why the word of wisdom? Where does the word of wisdom, how does the word of wisdom impact us? Where does it talk about it in the Bible? I mean, just so many different questions that they had about everything. And so me and my companion really put in, during our personal studies and our companionship studies, we prepared hard for these lessons, because we wanted to teach them the best that we could, while having the Spirit there and inviting them to continue to keep their commitments of reading, of coming to church with us and things like that. So we ended up answering probably hundreds of questions to Poliana and her family, and they were keeping their commitments. They came to church. The aunt and Poliana were the only two that ended up coming to church, and then they kept progressing, and Poliana really just took off, just started loving it, getting involved in Relief Society activities prior to her baptism and everything like that. So then she was baptized. Poliana was a person who was extremely converted. She had received a strong witness from the Holy Ghost that it was true, and she was baptized and became a really influential member of the church there. To this day, she's served in multiple capacities in the church, from Relief Society president to primary president. And she just is the type of person that has this desire to serve her Heavenly Father, and to do those acts of kindness and things like that are pleasing within the eyes of Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. She was probably my convert that I had while I was down there, that really had the biggest impact on the community and the people around her. She had just finished law school, and she had made many friends. She was constantly bringing people to church, constantly reaching out and trying to help people to understand about the restored gospel, from acts of service to bringing us to their house to giving them a Book of Mormon. And she really had a love for the gospel, and that was one of the most unique experiences that I had to that point in my mission, because it really taught me to follow the Spirit when doing missionary work. Although that we were rushing home at that time when we first met her, although the contact that we had with her wasn't very good, and she didn't seem like she really cared that much about changing her ways, it was that impression that the Holy Ghost gave to me and to my companion to talk to her. And through the ripple effect, I'm sure that she has impacted many people's lives. And that really was the introductory moment for me of, if you follow the Spirit's going to guide you and do those things that you need to do, whether it makes sense to you at the time or not, because it most likely won't, or there will be opportunities where it won't. And that was a really cool experience that I had with Poliana. If you do get called to the Belo Horizonte Mission, you're in for a real treat. The mission really has a wide variety of opportunities, from developed wards and stakes to very new branches and districts. You'll have the opportunity to serve in capacities with members, as far as in the missionary work, and you may have opportunities to serve in other callings, as far as being a branch president or some sort of other auxiliary member. The missionary work is exciting in Belo Horizonte. It's a challenging area where there's a lot of people that are deep-rooted in their beliefs of Catholicism, but also that have open hearts and are willing to change. My bit of advice for you is to work hard. The work can be discouraging at times. The sun can be hot. You can be thirsty. But I promise you that the reward that you'll get from serving as a missionary is far greater than any of those physical ailments that you may be going through. I know that for me in particular, a lot of time was spent walking around, talking to people, wearing out your shoes, wearing out your clothes, have the hot sun beating down on you. And you'd have that time where you're in a lesson for 30 minutes teaching somebody, and the Spirit is so strong, and it makes it all worth it. When you see that person change their life and really want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and follow his example by being baptized, there's no greater joy that you can feel. And I promise you that as you look back on your own mission, you'll feel the same way. I love my mission. I love the people that I served with. The members are extremely willing to help, and they have very, very strong testimonies that they'll bear for you if you invite them to come along to the lessons. If you use them as a valuable asset, they can do wonders for the missionary work, not only while you're teaching the person, but after you leave and that person is fully integrated into the ward and feels the love from those members that have been in their home and have taught them with you. That's what I would recommend. My number one recommendation would be to definitely work with the members, as they're a huge part of the missionary work. Also, the number one thing to consider, or another thing to consider, is to have fun while you're doing the missionary work. Be able to be yourself. I was really worried about that when I was going out, that I wouldn't be able to be myself and be, a 19-year-old kid. But that is an important part of the missionary work, is to be yourself. Let your testimony show through in the way that you carry yourself, showing that we're a happy people, that we are happy to be serving and doing those things that we know to be true. I do have a testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to serve a mission, as I feel that was a way for me to strengthen my own testimony, but more importantly, a way for me to share the testimony that I have of Jesus Christ and his restored gospel to everybody that I came in contact with, whether it was on a bus, whether it was walking down the street, whether it was in a snack shop on the side of the road, or anywhere. It was the opportunity that I had to share the gospel with them and tell them that the things that I know to be true are true, and then have them feel the same through the Holy Ghost and through the witness of the Spirit.
The Belo Horizonte Mission is probably about 10 hours across by bus. It's condensed since I was there. It's split off into a couple different missions. When I was there, it was probably 14 hours from top to bottom. And it covers most of the state of Minas Gerais, which is a pretty large state that nobody's ever actually heard of until they go to Brazil. And it's right above São Paulo. So you're about 9 hours north of São Paulo. Everybody in your mission will attend the temple in São Paulo or in Campinas, both of which are 9 hours apart. But people in Minas Gerais they're in the Campinas temple district. So I was not able to go to the temple on my mission because it's outside the mission boundaries, and anybody going to Belo Horizonte probably will not as well. So just get used to 2 years without going to the temple. That wasn't really a detriment to missionaries, simply because the Lord blesses missionaries, and I'm sure that the Lord will compensate missionaries for their lack of ability to attend the temple during that time. Let's see, Minas Gerais is known for its pão de queijo, which interpreted means cheese bread. It's where cheese bread came from. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Tucanos, but they have some pretty good cheese bread there. So about 20 years ago, there were a couple missionaries that in the southeast of Minas Gerais, in a small, very Catholic town, that decided that one day they just got so fed up with people that were rejecting them, and they kicked a statue in the town, and it broke. They broke a statue, and the town went nuts. Literally, the missionaries had to be pulled out, and every member of the church in that city had to either leave the church or move out of the city. And so I would strongly advise against doing stupid things as missionary, because you are representing the church and you're representing all other missionaries, and your actions might have long-lasting consequences. All those members in that city could no longer go to church. Either they had to move, pick up and relocate if they wanted to stay members of the church, or they just had to abandon the church. And so that was it's a very serious problem, and because the church could not stay there anymore because of the rioting. So please, missionaries, don't be stupid. Remember who you are and that you're representing the Lord and other missionaries. When I was being trained, I sat down for a monthly planning with my trainer, and we had to decide how many baptisms did we want that month. Okay, and I was a new missionary and still very full of faith and hope, and I said, hey, let's get 8 baptisms this month. And my trainer looked at me like, you got to be kidding, man! Like, we just moved into the area, we knew nobody, we didn't know the place. 8 was quite a bit for that mission at that time in that area, and and he looked at me like I was crazy, and I was just like, hey, what do we have to lose? Like, if we don't baptize 8 people, we don't baptize 8 people, but we can still try for it. And he was like, okay, fine. And that week we had a baptism already scheduled from the previous elders that had left the area. And so we're like, great, where do we find 7 more? We don't know anybody in this area. That day we went down to an area and we found a kid and started talking to him, and 2 weeks later he was baptized, and we kept teaching his family. The rest of his family wasn't baptized, and then the week after that, we were across the street, across a main street, across the valley, really, from that house, and we found 2 neighbors, 2 families of 3 people each, and brought them to church and baptized them as well. And at the end of the month, we stopped, and when we reported our numbers to the zone leaders, we realized, wow, we did it. I mean, we hadn't really been paying attention to that goal during the month. We had just been working, but we had the righteous desires to be able to accomplish those 8 baptisms, and somehow that happened. And so I know that the Lord really wanted us to be able to baptize all those people in that month, and to be able to, and the Lord wanted to show to us that yes, it's possible. Let's build your faith a little bit, elders. It's possible to get all these people to come to church and to learn about the gospel. Minas Gerais, especially Belo Horizonte, has a lot of hills. It is one of the most hilly places in Brazil. And so get used to having sore legs, okay? And because of all these hills, you get some pretty extreme water patterns, okay? When it does rain, all of the water in an entire valley will stream down into one location, into a canal. And so because everything in the city is just concrete, water will just all run out into the streets. Like, people don't have lawns. Most everything in the city is concreted in. And so there is no place for the water to go except for running out on the streets. And so sometimes you'll get very torrential rainstorms, and you'll have rivers in the streets above your ankles. Sometimes when it's really bad, you're walking up in water up to your shins, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Sometimes you just got to go out and work, and you can't avoid the rivers, because they're on the sidewalks, they're in the streets, and there's just nothing you can do. Also, with regards to weather, it can be extremely sunny at times. It can be extremely sunny, so definitely I would suggest wearing sunscreen if you have very fair skin. I came home off a mission looking like a lobster because I hated sunscreen. I also hated umbrellas, and so I just got very wet and very burnt. And it took about a month for my skin to return to a normal color. So I would definitely recommend taking care of your skin because, also because of all the rain, you're going to go through quite a few pairs of shoes. I went through 4 pairs of shoes on my mission because of the rain and because of the rocky terrain. I mean, you're always walking on gravel or cobblestone, or the rocky roads aren't actually, they're not well made. They're pointed rocks that just get like stuck in the ground. And so a lot of times you're walking on very pointed objects, and again, there's just nothing you can do about it. So expect to go through quite a few pairs of shoes. If you have a shoe size that's smaller than 12, you're good to just buy shoes in Brazil. However, I have a size 13 shoe, and those are impossible to find in Brazil. About the highest Brazilian size that you can buy is 42. I'm a 47. So I would recommend having several pairs. If you have large feet, buy several pairs of really good shoes in advance and have your parents send them to you periodically throughout your mission. That's what I had to do, but I had to walk with torn up shoes for quite a few months waiting for the mail, because it takes about 2 months for a package to get to Brazil. But if you have feet smaller than 11 or 12, then, or whatever size 42 in American shoe size is, then you can buy shoes there for really cheap. They're like 20 Brazilian reais, which when I was there was about 10 American dollars. And they're like painter's shoes. They're for like workmen, you know. They're pretty high quality. They're pretty durable, but they're cheap. So Brazilians have an interesting work schedule. They don't work 9 to 5. They work all hours of the day, crazy hours. A lot of times families don't really see each other because the mom will work in the day, the dad will work in the night, and the kids are off at school, and families just don't see each other very much. Sometimes people will have interesting work schedules, like they will work for 5 days out of a week and get 2 days off, but those 2 days will keep rotating throughout the week. And so they'll end up working every other Sunday. A lot of times people will work every other Sunday. And as missionaries, that's incredibly frustrating, because you try to get people to come to church, and you invite them to start keeping this commandment of keeping the Sabbath day holy and being at church and partaking of the sacrament and being there to receive instruction. And their livelihood prevents them from doing so on a consistent basis. And so it's difficult to ask people to give up their job in order to be coming to church. And that it's something that I feel should be done, but it's a stumbling block for many investigators, because they don't want to lose their jobs. They want to be able to provide for their families, and that's a major stumbling block, is getting people to church instead of going to work. A lot of times people will also just be working at night, and they're sleeping during the day, and they just have interesting schedules, and it's difficult to be able to find them at home, especially together as a family. I mean, I love teaching families, but it's difficult to find a family all at home, just because the hours are so, they're not very consistent like they are here in the United States, where people get 9 to 5 jobs, you know, school's out by 3 o'clock, and everybody's home for dinner. And you can teach people from 6 to 9. That's not necessarily the case in Brazil. The Brazilian people are very open to listening to strangers. I had no problem teaching lessons by just knocking doors. It probably wasn't the best way of teaching lessons, but that's really what our technique was at the time, just doing lots of door knocking. And and we would get in plenty of doors. People love to let people in and listen to what they've got to say. Some areas more than others. There's a diversity in the areas, in their willingness to let people in and listen to them. But as a general rule, most people are very willing to hear what you have to say. They might not always agree with you, but they're very willing to listen. And I found that especially helpful, especially in the first few months of my mission. I just really needed to get experience teaching and just teaching lessons, improving my Portuguese, and that really helped as I was able to just communicate with lots of people. They were just they were very patient with my Portuguese. My Portuguese was probably better than it would have been had I not taken 5 years of Spanish in school, but it still wasn't the best, and people were very patient with me. The Brazilian people were very understanding that I was not a native speaker. I did not, grow up speaking their language, but they still would, stop and listen to me and were forgiving of my grammatical mistakes. And they wouldn't correct me when I said something completely wrong. They would just understand what I meant to say. And that was a little bit frustrating because after about a year and a half on my mission, I realized I had been saying something wrong. I forget what the word was, but I realized after a while that I had been saying something wrong, and I was frustrated that nobody had ever corrected me. No member or investigator, not even any companions of mine had corrected me. And I had Brazilian companions, but they were just too nice to correct your grammar. At least the people that I ran into. Maybe there's others that will correct you, but I had the fortune or misfortune of not being corrected on my grammar. I just had to do lots of studying on my own studying and observation in order to improve my Portuguese. Get used to rice and beans because you're going to have them every day. Most days, I should say. If you're in a particularly rich area, sometimes they have spaghetti instead of rice and beans, and that's pretty good. But still, most days you'll end up eating rice and beans. The members of the church will most likely feed you every day. They'll feed you a lunch. Most wards and branches have lunch calendars that they go around. In Belo Horizonte, when I was there, we were not allowed to eat dinner. We just ate a very large lunch with members at around noon, and we worked for 8 hours. And so get used to that too, because dinner is not a big deal in Brazil. It's extremely hard to teach during the lunch hour because everybody's making lunch, and nobody wants to really listen to a random visitor. But you won't find too much trouble teaching during dinner hours. Because it's not quite as big of a meal. Most people just eat leftovers for their dinner, and so no one's really preparing a dinner. People have time to sit down and listen to you during the dinner hour. Interestingly enough, a lot of members would ask me, like, "Oh, have you had feijoada?" And I'd say, "Yes, I've had feijoada." Every single member that's fed me has asked me that. It's this bean and pork dish that also goes over rice, but it's made with black beans and lots of interesting parts of the pig, like nose and the foot, and just lots of, like, the ears are sometimes in there. Lots of interesting parts of the pig, and it's really good. I've never actually eaten pig ear. Most of the times they'll take that out, but sometimes they'll cook it with it in. But even after a year and a half on mission, members were still asking me if I had eaten feijoada. And I was just, yes, sister, I've eaten feijoada. Guaraná is one of the most popular sodas in Brazil. Yeah, most likely you will be fed Guaraná at least 5 times a week for lunch. Just get used to that. People like Guaraná down there. Also, you should get used to large portions of meat. It's usually like rice, beans, and meat, and that's usually it. Rice, beans, and meat. And maybe they'll have a salad, but salad is not a salad. Salad usually consists of lettuce and tomatoes. That's not a salad, but whatever. They like to call it a salad, so we'll give them that.
The Portuguese is very different from Brazil to Portugal. But the cool thing about serving in Portugal is that you are going to meet a lot of Brazilians. And they're all going to speak with a Brazilian accent. And you're going to learn to understand it very well and probably even speak like that if you want to. But you're also going to understand the Portuguese accent and all the African accents. You're not going to have a problem understanding any of those by the end of your mission. It's going to be great. Elders who go to Brazil only understand Brazilian accents. So you kind of learn to speak with both. And it's fun because I can speak with both, so I can give examples if you want. I'll just say the name of the church. That cool?
Yeah.
So a Brazilian would say, A Igreja de Jesus Cristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias. Whereas in Portuguese, A Igreja de Jesus Cristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias. It's a lot more closed mouth and a lot more sh sounds. You know, I like to imagine that Sean Connery is speaking Brazilian Portuguese. That's about how Portugal does it. It's different, but it's cool because going to Portugal, you're going to learn all the different accents, and you'll probably have a lot of fun imitating different ones. Really entertaining.
When you're preparing to serve in Brazil, you definitely need to learn the pronunciation of the Portuguese alphabet before you go into the MTC, because it helps a lot. I was able to have some older roommates of mine help me out with the pronunciation of Portuguese, and so I was able to start reading in the Book of Mormon out loud in Portuguese to myself several months before I went into the MTC, and that helped a lot in the transition to learn Portuguese. I'll go over the differences between English and Portuguese. The main differences are that sometimes a T makes a ch sound, like a CH, instead of a T sound. Sometimes a D makes a J sound, like a J, instead of a D sound. You just have to learn when and where. A lot of the vowels have a Spanish pronunciation, and so if you're familiar with Spanish, then the transition to Portuguese will be a lot easier. I had the opportunity to study Spanish for 5 years before I learned Portuguese, so that helped my Portuguese a lot. But I would definitely recommend learning the pronunciation rules for Portuguese before you go into the MTC. Portuguese is very similar to Spanish. However, there are a few pronunciation and grammatical differences. I think a lot of times Portuguese is a lot more forgiving with placement of words in a sentence than Spanish is. And a lot of people will say that Portuguese sounds like drunken Spanish. I wouldn't say that it sounds drunken, but it definitely is a lot more slurred. In Spanish, you really have to enunciate everything you say. Like, words are just a lot more deliberate. There's a lot more consonant sounds, a lot more very hard sounds. And in Portuguese, there's j's and ch's, and there's just lots of slurred sounds. It's a very fluid language. And so people will a lot of times be used to Spanish, and then they'll hear Portuguese and they'll just think that you're drunk, or that you're just not very good at speaking, or that you have some sort of speaking disability. And that's not the case. Portuguese is just a very fluid language. There's some differences between Spanish and Portuguese in grammar. For example, the formal and the informal are switched. So in Spanish, to say informally you use the tu form. In Portuguese, tu is the formal instead of the informal. And so in Portuguese, you really only have to learn 4 tenses instead of 5 or 6 in Spanish, because the you and the plural you form are always spoken in third person. So you only have to learn first and third person verbs, the endings for first and third person verbs. So a second person conjugation is never really used in Portuguese, except for in the scriptures and sometimes in the South. Or if you're just trying to sound sophisticated and have some fun with people. Sometimes I would, just to be fun, speak in the second person, or just speak with some interesting language that I would learn from reading the scriptures, which is a very formal text. And people would stop and be taken aback because they weren't used to hearing that. But it's still correct to be using a second person form. But just in Portuguese, you really only have to learn 4 tenses instead of 6 like you would in Spanish. So to demonstrate a difference between the pronunciation between Spanish and Portuguese, I'll give you an example of how to say the church's name in Spanish, and then do it in Portuguese, just so you can hear the difference in how Spanish is a lot more enunciated and a lot more choppy, and Portuguese is a lot more slurred. So in Spanish, the church's name is La Igreja de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Dias. And in Portuguese, it's A Igreja de Jesucristo dos Santos dos Últimos Dias. You see how there's a lot more j's and ch's, and it's just a lot more slurred in Portuguese. Whereas in Spanish, it's a little bit more choppy. Even though I was saying it fast, you can tell it's a lot more enunciated, and the syllables that are used are a lot more deliberate. And so I believe that you can speak a little bit faster in Portuguese, just because you don't have to, just because a lot more of the syllables are a lot more slurred. I was excited to learn Portuguese rather than going Spanish speaking, because I can't roll my R's. And in Portuguese, you'd never have to roll your R's. It's great. I was so excited because a double R in Spanish, you have to roll. But in Portuguese, it just makes a sound, like an H. R's a lot of times make H sounds, which flabbergasted me for a minute. And so that was one of the difficulties in learning Portuguese, was just getting the pronunciation down. But really, once I had the rules of pronunciation down, it was a breeze to learn Portuguese, just because for me it was very similar to Spanish, and so I was able to just replace all my Spanish knowledge with Portuguese. And once I had those pronunciation rules down, I was able to just really fly with my language learning. When I was being trained, my trainer and I liked to grab ice cream on the way home at night. After we were done teaching for the night, there was this ice cream shop, and after going there for a couple times, I decided I wanted to order coconut ice cream. And so I wanted to be all confident about it, and so I walked up to the counter and I said, "I'd like coconut ice cream," except instead of saying cocoa, I said coco, which is poop, not coconut. The guy at the counter stopped and looked at me for a minute and didn't know what to say until he realized that I wasn't Brazilian, I wasn't good at the language, and I was probably asking for coconut ice cream instead of poop flavored ice cream. So definitely, know your differences between the emphasis on words, because cocoa is very different than cocoa. Belo Horizonte is actually a pretty safe place. It's not, at least for missionaries. I might think differently if I weren't a missionary at the time, but I'm a pretty big guy. I mean, I'm 6'6", and Brazilians are pretty small, and so most of them wouldn't think about messing with me. However, you still have to take precautions to ensure your safety while you're there. A lot of missionaries wouldn't carry wallets, or if they did carry a wallet, they would just have like 2 reais in it, just to be able to give to somebody if they were robbed. But a lot of times, so what I would do is I took my white handbook and I took the book out, and I just was left with the white covering. And then inside that white covering, I would put my credit card and my cash. And then I would put that, and then I put my name tag on that white covering, and then stick that in my pocket, so it'd be hidden inside. And that would be my wallet right here in my chest pocket. And so if I were robbed, I wouldn't really have anything to be able to give anybody. Sometimes I would have a wallet on me, and I'd be able to hand them a fake wallet with $2 or $3 in it. But really, crime isn't too much of an issue. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just take some basic safety precautions, and you'll be fine. Don't go looking for trouble. But people respect the missionaries, quite honestly, and people are very God-fearing down in Brazil, and they don't really want to mess with missionaries, just because we work teaching the gospel all day, every day, and people know that, and they don't really want to mess with God. Undoubtedly, you will have some difficult companions. It's going to happen. But be nice to them. and work well with them. Be very charitable. That's one of the lessons I had to learn the hard way. And work hard and be a good example for all of your companions, so that you don't end up both slacking off. I ended up training 6 elders, and unfortunately 3 of them went home, which doesn't make me feel like a great trainer. But 3 of them went home for disobedience or just straight up laziness, and that was discouraging to me, and I'm sure to them. And it's just an all-around bad situation. And so just keep in mind that not all elders will want to work as hard as you do, or maybe they'll want to work harder than you do. I mean, you just have to learn to get along with them and to build each other up, to bring each other along instead of dragging each other down. Always be the bigger man and try to help each other along. One day we went looking for a member referral, and he wasn't home, and so we taught his cousin instead. And at that time in our mission, if somebody did not accept to be baptized on the first lesson, we were not allowed to go back and teach them again. We would teach them the first lesson, invite them to be baptized, and if they said no, we wouldn't go back unless they had come to church that week. And so when we taught this first lesson to this guy, and he said, "I got to think about it." And we're just like, "Oh, everybody says that. He's not actually going to think about it." And my companion said, "Okay, think about it. We'll come back tomorrow." And I looked at him like, "What do you mean we'll come back tomorrow? We're not supposed to do that." But he was senior companion, and so I'm just like, "Okay, whatever. We'll come back tomorrow." And so we ended up going back 2 days later. I don't know why we didn't go back the next day, but we went back 2 days later, and he opened the door and he said, "Elders, can I still be baptized on the 7th of, when was it? July?" He asked us, "Can I still be baptized?" And we're like, "Wow, like that wasn't what we were expecting." And so we sat down with him and taught him. We started teaching him everything. And this guy, we gave him a Book of Mormon on that second lesson. It was the 24th of July that he got the Book of Mormon. That's what it was. Yep. And a couple lessons later, we started teaching about the word of wisdom. Actually, he taught himself about the word of wisdom. We gave him a pamphlet the day before to read up on. And so and then we'd come in the next day and he would teach us everything that he had learned. And it was great. Like, he was the easiest investigator ever because we didn't have to teach him anything. He just taught himself. And so then he comes in and he tells us on the day after we gave him the Word of Wisdom pamphlet, and he says, "Okay, these are my problems." And he started listing off all the problems he had with the Word of Wisdom, which were pretty much all of them. Including lots of heavy drugs. And he said, "The day that you gave me the Book of Mormon was the last day that I've used any of these substances." And we gave him some replacements for coffee and for tea. Really, there's no replacements for drugs or alcohol. But we told him, "Look, this Book of Mormon that you have, it's powerful. And we promise you that if you read the Book of Mormon, every time you have the urge to break the word of wisdom, that you won't. That you will receive the strength that's necessary to overcome this temptation." And he did. Every time he felt the urge to go out and get some crack, he would grab the Book of Mormon instead. And some days we would come back and he would have read like 50 pages just because I guess he had lots of temptations to go use drugs. But it was great because he actually understood everything that he had read, and he would just tell us everything that he had read in the previous like 7 or 8 chapters that day. And he was baptized several weeks later, and he doesn't because of the Book of Mormon, he was able to overcome all of those temptations. And not since the 24th of July of 2011 has he broken the word of wisdom, because of the Book of Mormon, because of the promise that we gave him, that what we didn't give it to him, but really it's the Lord's promise that as we seek to read his words, and that he will give us the strength that we need to be righteous and to follow his commandments. Missionary work is really booming down in Brazil, so you should really be excited to go. There is a lot of work to be done. The field is white, all ready to harvest. There are quite a few people who are ready and willing to listen to you. And really, it just takes your determination and your hard work now to go out and get those people that are waiting and ready to accept the gospel and who really need it right now. You will have the great opportunity to teach thousands of people. And not all of those people will listen to you. You just have to, realize that now. But the people that do listen to you, the many people who listen to you, will make it all worth it. Somebody once asked me, after I had told them about a hard experience I had, she said, was it all worth it? And I said, most definitely, absolutely. There's no other thing that I would have done with my life at that moment in time which would have benefited me greater. Possibly the reason why was because I wasn't out to benefit myself. As missionaries, we really aren't. We aren't there to benefit ourselves. I had one more ward mission leader tell me that you're really here on your mission for yourself. Your greatest convert will be you. And I looked at him like he was crazy, because I was there to teach. I was there to baptize. I was there to work. I wasn't there for me. I was there to help other people. And now that I'm home, I realize that, yes, the mission helped me become a better person, more than I could have possibly imagined. When we forget about ourselves and go to work, that's when we improve ourselves. That's when we realize who we are. That's when we realize that our true desires are to serve the Lord and to help his people and to bring them the gospel that they are so desperately craving. Especially in Brazil, there are so many people there that are desperately craving to hear the gospel.